I didn't expect it to work. In fact, I assumed it would be a faff, maybe even a total failure. But here we are, 1 year later, and one of my snake plants has grown more than he ever has before. The leaves are standing taller and the colours seem richer, and most surprising of all, he's putting out fresh growth faster than his siblings. Now, to achieve this, you might assume that I gave him more food for his belly or plonked him on a sunnier spot or even upgraded his pot, but no, it was something else entirely, and something that I don't see anyone else doing to their snake plants. It was one small change that I've been avoiding for years, but I now wish I'd done it sooner because it looks like it's exactly what this plant has been waiting for. In this video I'm going to show you exactly what I changed, why it worked, and how it's transformed not one but two of my snake plants into completely different plants. Now, let's be honest, snake plants are supposed to be the ultimate no-fuss, set-it-and-forget-it houseplant, the true symbol of neglect. Stick them in a dark corner, ignore them for a month, and they'll still greet you with that spiky salute. And while that's true to a point, the reality is that they might well survive, but they're not going to thrive. I've had snake plants for years. I've propagated them, I've split them, I've moved them around the house, and they always do the same thing. Nothing. They just sit there, and occasionally you get a new leaf or perhaps a new pup appears out of nowhere. But for the most part, they're static little green statues. And I accepted that for a long time. I figured that's just how they are, until one of mine stopped following the script. This wasn't even meant to be a test. I'd split up my Star Canyon granite, which is a gorgeous but quite alien looking plant, because the pot was getting pretty crowded. When I first did this for the Sheffies over on Patreon, I put all 3 smaller plants into soil like I normally would, and ploned them into nice bright spots in my house. A few weeks later, I decided to experiment with one of them, something that I'd never done before or seen anyone else doing. I had some materials lying around, so I thought, well, why not? It was more out of curiosity than anything else, and I wasn't really expecting big results. To be honest, I was expecting a bit of a failure. Fast forward a few months and the 2 in soil looked okay, exactly what I expected. You see, this particular type of snake plant really is a slow grower. Well, he has been for me since I bought him. So they weren't looking any worse, but not better either. Very little growth, as expected. But the 3rd one was a different story. I actually had new growth. 2 brand new pups shot up, and for this plant that's a big deal. It might just be because the shoots were new and all that, but they seem more vibrant with brighter greens and deeper browns. He seemed to have a spring in his step, and that's when I realised I might be onto something. It wasn't just a one-off either. Because I saw success with this guy, I decided to try it out on my small variegated snake plant to see if it was all a fluke. So again, I made the transition and made a video on my Patreon page. Just look how small he was before, and now look at him. Lots of new growth. Not dramatic overnight stuff of course, but within weeks the plant was visibly more active. The roots filled out the container faster and the new growth looked stronger. So what was this magical change? Well, I'm sure you've spotted it already, but I moved them into semi-hydro. Specifically, I potted them into Leca, which are just little balls of hardened clay, and sat the pot inside a decorative outer pot with a pool of water at the bottom. That's right, no soil, just a container of clay pebbles and water, and it's completely changed the way these snake plants grow. Now, if you've never done semi-hydro before, then I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? The plant is literally sitting in water. Isn't that the opposite of what snake plants want? Well, let's talk about why it actually works. Here's the thing you probably already know about snake plants. They hate wet feet. Let them sit in soggy soil for weeks on end and the poor little sucker ain't going to be around for much longer. But they do still need some water. You know, they're still a plant and all that. Go too long without the good stuff and they really will start to sulk. For the absolute best growth, you need to hit that sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone. Not watering too often so the soil is always damp, but watering enough so they're happy enough to grow. And this is tricky to achieve with soil. Especially when you often forget to water, like I most definitely never have, ever. Of course, when we do forget, we tend to overcompensate and give a ton all in one go. But this is where it all goes wrong for Mr. Snake Plant. The roots go brittle from that drought period, start to die off, and then when we drown them, they turn to rot and we're in a world of trouble. With semi-hydro, none of that happens because there's no drying out. The leca wicks up from the reservoir in the pot and the roots stay consistently moist, no drying out and then getting soaked. And most importantly, is full of oxygen. That's the bit people often miss. Root rot isn't caused by water, it's caused by a lack of oxygen. In soggy soil, the air gets squeezed out and the roots suffocate, but in Leca, the air stays in and the roots get moisture and oxygen at the same time. And you can see the difference. The leaves are more upright, the colour is richer, and those new pups come in faster and bigger. I count 5 new pups on this bad boy alone since I made the switch. By the way, plant problems like root rot are listed in my troubleshooting handbook that you can nab for free in the description. It's handy to have on your phone when something naughty rears its ugly head and you're not sure what it is or why it's happening, so check it out. Now, when I say semi-hydro, most people think of Leca because it's easy to find and relatively cheap. But there's also POM, which is another type of soilless medium. It's heavier, more nutrient retentive and doesn't float like Leca. I've used both and they both work. For snake plants, either will give you that stable moisture-oxygen balance that they seem to crave. So I would start with Leca if you're curious and then maybe move to POM if you get hooked. So let's talk about how to set this all up. Here's what I did. I rinsed the Leca thoroughly to get rid of dust and soot, but I did so in the garden. This is so it didn't clog up the drains in my house. And I didn't bother soaking it or going mad trying to make it sterile or anything. It's not really necessary in my book. Then I removed as much soil from the roots as I could. You don't have to be perfect, just get most of it off. I gave the roots a good rinse in water to help loosen the bits that were stuck in there. Once the roots were clean, I nestled the plant into a plastic nursery pot, filled it with Leca and set that pot into a ceramic outer pot. Then I poured in water until it came about a third of the way up the Leca, and that's it. I topped up the water when it got low so that the plant always had that moisture available, and this meant there was no more guesswork about when to water, which was a massive relief. All you're doing is seeing how much water is in the pot and topping up if needed. This next part is really important. Get it wrong and you won't see the growth that I'm promising in this video. You see, soil does a lot more than we give it credit for. It holds nutrients, it buffers pH, and it has microbes doing their thing in the background. Leca doesn't do any of that, so if you keep using your regular houseplant fertiliser, you're going to run into problems. Most regular fertilisers assume that soil is handling part of the workload. Things like trace elements, calcium, magnesium are all getting topped up by the soil. But in semi-hydro, the plant's getting everything through the water. So if it's not in your fertiliser, he's not getting it. That's why I switched to a hydroponic fertiliser, one that's full spectrum and designed for this type of growing. I add a little to the reservoir every couple of weeks, that's all it takes. There's one more thing that we need to be mindful of. It's important for all plants regardless of what medium they're calling home, but it's especially important for semi-hydro. Now don't get too alarmed when I say this because it's dead simple when you get your head around it. The pH of your water. I know, it sounds like you're back in chemistry class, but it turns out if the pH is off, it doesn't matter how perfect your fertiliser is, your plant won't be able to absorb the nutrients properly. It's like having a fridge full of food but with the door locked and the key lost. You know the food is there but you can't get to it. If your water is in the neutral range, then the key appears and the door can be opened or something. Somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5 on the pH scale is usually ideal. In the UK, the tap water is naturally close to that, but it's still worth checking. I use cheap test strips you can buy online to check when I made the transition. If your water is too alkaline, then you can use a pH down solution to bring it back into range. Same if it's too acidic, though that is less common. I know it sounds complicated, but once you've checked it once or twice, you know where you stand. Now before you leap in head first, let me flag a few common mistakes that people make when they first start. The first is letting the reservoir go completely dry. In soil, the plant might have a bit of a buffer, but in semi-hydro, if the water drops too low, the roots are suddenly cut off. Second is not flushing. I'm not talking about the toilet here, I'm talking about the Leca or POM. Every couple of months, it's a good idea to give your Leca a rinse with plain water to wash out any mineral build-up from the fertiliser, otherwise the roots can get a bit salty. Third is starting with a stressed plant. Semi-hydro is amazing, but it won't rescue a dying plant, so don't convert a plant that's already on its last legs. Start with a healthy one or a fresh pup. And fourth is topping up endlessly without ever refreshing. Every so often, empty out the reservoir and start fresh. It keeps the water from turning into a weird brown coloured soup. If you're thinking about giving semi-hydro a go, here's the easiest way to start. don't convert your biggest, oldest plant right away. Instead, take a pup, one of those little side shoots that your snake plant has been quietly producing. Pop it in a pot of Leca, add some nutrient-rich water and watch patiently as it starts to grow. You'll probably notice the roots forming quickly, and I like to use a clear plastic pot to watch this. Once they do, the leaves start to follow. And from there you'll know if it's something that you want to do with more plants. That's exactly how I started, and I didn't convert the whole shelf overnight. And slowly I'm experimenting with more and more plants. One that this works absolute wonders with is the spider plant. Say goodbye to brown dead leaves and say hello to lush green growth. You can learn all about it in this video here, so click to watch and I'll see you there.